This is Beyond the Byte with Joe and Abe, a cybersecurity conversation. In each episode, we get to know someone and discuss their journey, how they got here, and what they learned along the way. Through these conversations, we at Graylog hope to better understand what it means to be a good citizen within our community and continue our evolution as a cybersecurity solution provider. This conversation is sponsored by Graylog, an award-winning provider of SIEM, log management, and API security solutions. I'm Randy, the producer of this podcast, and here are your hosts, Joe and Abe.
Hey, everyone. Welcome to Beyond the Byte with Joe and Abe. I guess I forget the whole name of the podcast is the whole thing. And we have a super exciting episode this week. I am super pumped for this person. It's someone that was actually part of the reason I took the job at Graylog at one point in time. But before that, I have a question for you, Abe.
Oh boy.
Have you ever taken your kids to Disney World?
Oh,
I gotta do my math. World, the Florida one, right?
Land, either one, any of them, any of the Disney.
I've been to the Florida one, Disney World.
Been to the Florida one, yeah. How did that go?
It was amazing. It was amazing.
Yeah,
I think it's like the kids were an excuse for me to go to Disney World. It was
100%. 100%.
I am 100% the kind that's like looking, when I go to these kinds of things, I'm looking for like the string behind the mannequin and, you know, how does it all work when something's floating at me? When I do a ride, how does it feel like I'm falling and stuff like that? And I'm always looking for that. There is zero trace. And I could talk at length about some of the things that I was really impressed with. Never mind like all of the stuff around Disney. I just mean like, let's say that theme park, the customer experience behind it, etc. I could talk at length about some of the things I've been really impressed with, and there's a reason I'm a fan of the Be Our Guest School of Customer Management. So
completely agree, but I'm going to take it in a totally different direction.
I figured you would, yeah.
So I'm heading to Disneyland this week with my partner, and because she's in Vegas for a conference, and when you're within a 45-minute flight, you just go, right? Like that's just how it works. Even though I'm taking a 5-hour flight to get to Vegas to then fly the next morning. But I'm not taking my kids. And I have not taken my kids. And I've been to Disneyland like 4 or 5 times since they've been born, and will not take them right now. Mostly because they're 5 and 7.
Well, yeah, okay, fair.
And the idea of a stroller at Disneyland is something that I cannot handle.
Mm-hmm.
But what we did this weekend instead was we did a Disney night where I made churros and popcorn and stuff like that. And I put on YouTube videos of rides. Like full POV videos of rides. And I 100% pretended to go on the ride. And we got on the Incredicoaster, which is the roller coaster at Disneyland. And I picked one of my kids up in a chair at a time and like did the roller coaster as I'm like flying through. And I just realized like just how much crap there is on YouTube. You know, like anything that I want to do, I spent 3 hours of my Friday night that is usually movie night Friday, but doing Disney stuff because my kids were upset that I was going to Disneyland without them. And probably it makes me a bad father, to be completely honest. But yeah, it's amazing all the things that end up on there. And I'm sure your kids, Abe, as well, watch the craziest things. Like my youngest has a tablet that suddenly is playing some random video with, I don't know, Teletubbies, animals, all sorts of stuff in it. It's just going for hours somehow.
Yeah.
These videos are hours long.
I was really weighing my opinion on what you had just said. Like, we were like, yeah, I'm going. But instead I, threw my kids around the living room while playing YouTube videos as a second to going to Disneyland. And I was like, at first I was just like, dude. But then I was like, you know what? Honestly, with the consumption and how kids watch and consume media, like, I mean, we sat down and watched whatever at 5 o'clock after school, before dinner on TV, mostly ads. And whereas they do the same thing on YouTube, mostly ads, and that is their world consumption. And I mean, a lot of them kind of went through some world changing names we're not going to mention. And I know Boy Scout troops that did tours of museums and stuff all that same way. And so this is like a normalized medium for them.
100%.
So you hit me in a real like yin and yang situation there, man. I'm not going to lie. I was just going, dude, I got too much. I wasn't ready
And,
for that.
and for our listeners at home, if you want to report Joe, the phone number for Child Protective Services is.
To be fair, I'm going to be taking them to Disney next year. It's all in preparation for that because they're going to be 8 and 6. I promised them when they were 8 and 6, they would go to Disney World. But the problem is, the biggest issue is I want to ride the rides that I want to ride, and I need them to be prepared to ride the ride that I want to ride. You know what I mean? So now that I've successfully filled banter with something I came up with 2 minutes before the podcast. Speaking of YouTube videos, Randy, will you tell us about today's guest?
Absolutely. Well, many of you may know our guest today because, like us, Tom Lawrence has amassed over 53 views of his content on YouTube. Well, let me correct that. Unlike us, Tom Lawrence has amassed 53 million views of his content on YouTube. Tom's been working in tech since the mid-90s, founded his company Lawrence Systems in 2003, and in 2014, Tom launched the Lawrence Systems YouTube channel, where he provides information and insight on all things technology. Today, in addition to his content creation through Lawrence Systems, Tom also provides IT consulting and solution design through CNWR. Tom Lawrence, welcome to the podcast.
Great to be here. This is it's been a while. It's funny. I was actually organizing some of the old videos I had earlier today, and like it's just weird. I mean, all the way in 2014, when I see some of that really old stuff I did, first I cringe. It's good watching videos that you did, but if you don't cringe, that means you didn't get any better.
That's true. It's 100% true.
But yeah, it's interesting because 2017 is when I got serious about it, but officially 2014 is when I had the idea in my head. It just took 3 years to get the idea from my head to actually accomplishing something. It was like throwing spaghetti at the wall. Like, hey, look, I'm going to make a laptop repair video. I'm going to review a vacuum. That happened. No, but I was learning how to do it.
Yeah.
So you're saying there's hope for us?
Just work your way through it until you figure out what you like doing. And the problem, especially, I think, with people in tech, we like doing all the things, and we want to do them all at once, exactly at the same time, and 20 unfinished projects later.
100%. 100%. All right, we're going to kick this off with my favorite question of the podcast, and then we'll get into your opinions on me as a father, your journey, all that. we can open that up. The question I ask, and being that you have several videos specifically about our sim and our product, be gentle, but why does sim and log management suck to you in today's day and age?
Couple of reasons. So one of the problems comes down to the fact that we have syslog. That sounds like a standard and it's close, but there's variations to the way it's implemented. So there's not any time when we were designing all the technology, when I had started in the early 90s and grabbed my Red Hat floppies and tried to make the Xserver work in those early days, that we thought we'd come to a time where I need a consolidated way for all these different disparate projects that I was working on to have one source of truth for logging and things like that. So we've kind of backed our way into it. Each person has their own way they've done it. Different applications may have different logging. And then Microsoft, they just sent the amateurs out there to kind of bang away on the keyboard and create some half-ass logging. Also, we call event log that we try to wrangle in and things like that. I actually recently did a whole video just about how sysmon is so important. And then I showed how to import those, but it's not just the fact that the event log's bad. It doesn't give you a lot of information without applying templates to sysmon. You can't just load sysmon. You got to load a series of other templates to it because Microsoft doesn't think people need that out of the box here in 2024. But hey, at least there's a methodology to do it. So I think that's what's led to it. It's because we built it after we built all the infrastructure. We start then with how do we monitor all the infrastructure? How do we watch it all? And I need a place to watch it because it turns out there's a lot of different moving parts in all these different businesses. Anything from a SCADA controller in the manufacturing world, which I have a lot of background in being in Detroit. We have a lot of the suppliers. That stuff doesn't even have log outputs for some of it. It's just kind of mystery box, crunching out parts. And we're not even sure when it was installed or how long it's been here, but the dust on it tells us a long time. I think that's probably why, though, is that we built it from a need, not from the beginning as a plan.
Yeah, I think that's really fair, right? Like we always talked about how like logging and those kinds of things were important in application design or whatever, right? That goes back, I mean, so many years into trying to figure out how to just get logs out. But we never thought about the idea of like, maybe they should all be in one place, maybe they should all be readable in the same way. Like, we still get custom applications where someone has written some custom JSON blob that you think JSON, you think standard, not it at all.
No,
And
as a kind of to Greylog's credit, one of the things you think about is what you talk about log ingestion, the fact that you've got grok pattern options, you've got all these different methodologies by which to receive logs and then parse them to try and figure out what format they're in. And a big part of the Greylog and the videos I've done have been like how to write the parsers, because each log format is different. Especially, I have a parser I put on my GitHub for people looking to import Unify, because they send some of it in syslog and then in between they embed JSON. So now you got to do this double thing to assemble that data back together to something meaningful. I mean, who thinks to send it that way? That's not me.
As someone who manages the professional services department, I wish it was only Unify.
Yeah, I know, seriously.
They're just an example, but certainly they're not an outlier in this. There's plenty of other companies that just send logs in whatever format they see fit.
That's
100%.
yes.
100%.
You couldn't be more wrong there. I mean, more right there. I mean, yeah. More of a bigger problem. Yes, there's a ton out there. Keeps us busy.
Yeah. I'm gonna stick by my answer to this question when I had to answer it myself, which is just vendors. Just vendors.
Vendors.
That's the issue with this. I think that's 100%. I think you just validated all of that. I appreciate that.
Was it XKCD that's got that comic that says, we have 10 standards, we're going to make a new one, so it's to bring all the standards together. Now we have 11 standards.
Now we have 11 standards. Yeah. And I love that. Like the righteousness of that is so deep. You know what I mean? Ultimately, the death of good filing was the filing cabinet, right?
Yes.
And it hasn't really stopped. So Joe, you did have a very good answer to this, but I think Tom's got you on at least in a solid competition. Why does Sim suck? Because we have syslog.
Yeah.
100%.
That's my
I
notes.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Then we got 1 and 2 there, and we're gonna let YouTube views pick who's number 1. So we're gonna
fair. On that though, let's dive into that. So normally this is where we kind of peek under the hood of what makes you tick and what you've worked on over time. Your background is quite well documented, and at least by you, and there's a lot of places we can find out more about you. So what I kind of want to peel back a little bit is you, maybe knowingly, maybe unknowingly, you've created a really interesting champion. And as someone who grew up technical in my whole career and has moved into management, that's not everybody's path. And you had a really interesting set on your biography, your My Story page, about how, I didn't really want to manage people, processes, contracts, et cetera anymore. And highlighting that as a further career avenue. Obviously, becoming a major influencer is one path that interests a lot of people, but the fact that you can still be technical, love your passion for electronics and technology, and carry that on further as a career and not have to go into managing processes and contracts. I think that championship that you've made is astronomical, and being a caveat of that for a lot of people, I think is a little bit of what causes some following. At least I know from other people. I'm still interested in this. He's still interested in this. He grew up on a Tandy TRS-80 or an Atari 2600, and so did I. And I don't want to manage spreadsheets and people. And that as a career path is phenomenal. So let's unpack that a little bit more, man. Let's talk about maybe where you decided it wasn't for you, or you tell me a little bit your story and some of the bumps and hurdles you had.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting because Jason Slagle, I became friends with him just a couple of years ago. He's president of CNWR, and he just had become president maybe 4 years ago. I'm trying to remember exactly when, but we became closer and closer friends, and he just wanted to try to run the business type thing. And it was like, that's his goal. He's kind of a very common career path. People kind of push you to it, get your fingers off the keyboard and manage people. And there's an oversold sexiness of books about being the entrepreneur, being the business owner and things like that. But I certainly myself at some level got caught up into it, but I accidentally started my company. I didn't set out with entrepreneurial dreams. I just really have a hard time with authority. So that was, and when I worked in corporate, which I left in 2003, I just turned them into my first customer out of need for the things that were changing in the dynamics of the situation. for the company I was working for. So they became my first client, and I started my company. And eventually I said, okay, I guess I got to get more customers. And, I kind of built on that, but I just always the happiest with fingers on keyboard. I spent bouncing back and forth. That's why I have on my story. Like I had an electronics repair place. I had a partner for that. Then I had my Lawrence Systems, which I've continued to have. It was always not something I wanted to do. Sometimes I got lucky and had some of the right people that let me be technical and they kind of helped manage the business. And that always kept me going a few more years. But finally it reached an untenable, I can't make YouTube videos, have all these leads, spend my time with my passion doing design and consulting, and actually playing with the projects, really looking at a customer's problem, going, how are we going to solve this? How are we going to implement this new design? What software can we use? And how can we solve this in an interesting, innovative way? And also deal with someone who's like, this employee called this employee a name and now they're yelling at each other. And I'm like, oh, I don't know why do you do these things is what I answer. And I eventually realized is I can't manage people that well unless you're extremely self-motivated. So the opportunity, we actually started the merger process for a little while beforehand. And it turns out mergers are really complicated when you're not selling your company and the lawyers have no idea what you want to do. So the lawyers got confused, like, wait a minute, you want to keep Lawrence Systems? I said, no, I don't want the IT side, but legally I want to own all of my copyright and everything on all of my videos. And they're like, that's hard. I'm like, so the merger actually got delayed almost a year because of I wouldn't move on any of that. And Jason's like, well, I don't really want all that. I'm like, well, you can't afford to buy it because you'd end up owning my channel. I need 100% autonomy on this. So it was a weird split we made. But when we came over the deal, I was thrilled about it because now I spend a big part of my time doing just solutions design. Nobody reports to me, but everyone talks to me and the technical side. So I get to engage with anyone with technical questions. If you have an HR question, it's completely not my problem. Oh, you don't like what's in the employee manual? That is Jason's problem. I joke a lot. That sounds like a Jason problem. Even when I'm talking to Jason or in a management meeting, I'm like, oh, that's a Jason problem for sure. Oh, someone's got to go on a tip. Oh, good luck with that, guys.
That sounds dreamy.
I just landed at a super happy spot where I'm at, where I get to do the technical side. And Jason's extremely technical. It's weird to me because he's a absolutely top-notch cybersecurity. We went to a hacking thing earlier this year, or was it late last year? And we ended up in a CTF room. And me and him, we're competing against teams who are dedicated to this. We're like a 2-person team. We scored second place in this hacking event for CTF.
Wow.
Well, I shouldn't say we. Tom got 3 flags. Jason got like 40. So every now and then I was kind of helpful where I'd point, I go, I think it's this. And most of the time I'd scratch my head because he's very, very technical. But, it's just where some people want to be. He's solid at the management. He obviously knows the numbers really well. So it's been kind of cool. I have no regrets of passing it all off over to that side of it. And really being able to focus again has kind of renewed energy in me again. I go, yes, I'm just technical now. I don't really have to have these worries about some of it. And I didn't even set up any commission for the sale. I'm very public about how I sold it. We have a second channel called Business Technicalities where we dive into all things on IT business. I had them give me a fixed salary. They're buying all the leads, so to speak, but I'm on a fixed salary. So I don't ever have to count it. No one wants to track it. I don't want to track it. That sounds like process and stuff I don't want to do. So, and I'm also part owner of CNWR. So the stuff that comes through, if the company makes money, profit sharing comes up, and I'm a happy person.
Fantastic. It feels like you've hit like that middle thing all of us technical people want at some point in our career, which is this weekend I determined that after Graylog sells or whatever, and I take what's going to be billions of dollars. I'm just going to take a break from tech and I'm going to open a Lego cafe somewhere and just chill and hang out. Right now, the likelihood that that's actually going to happen is probably pretty slim because I'm addicted to tech. And I think we all are in some way. And it sounds like you found that happy middle, right? Of like, you're letting go of a lot of the stress and you're letting go of a lot of the red tape and the things that get in all of our way.
Yeah.
But you've kept the thing that we all enjoy, which is let me tinker, like, like the thing that we all got into this for, right? The thing that we all, let me go break stuff and then make people happy because I fixed it.
and that's important. So in the cybersecurity side, I'm still involved on that, which has been fun. The only part I'm not really involved in is if someone calls me for a problem, there are layers that have failed, and it's truly a problem, which has been kind of cool because I have been running a tech company and managing. I mean, when we transferred over, I think we had 70 clients that we brought over to CNWR or something like that, 60 or
Wow.
70, quite a few customers over there. But, the stress of being a managed service provider and being in charge of all that security was tough. And that was like my big relief. The other side of the coin, the recent Screen Connect issue, we were deeply involved in it. I'm good friends with the people at Huntress who took the lead on that. And we not only ripped out a video real quick to kind of get the word out as best we can, I went and made a list. Well, we were actually using Shodan. We wrote a script that's kind of cool that would grab the Shodan list, parse it, sort by state, and then give us a list of anyone running an old version. And then I was sorting out for schools and hospitals. Hospitals, it turned out, were really hard to get a hold of. I did talk to several IT directors at schools and were able to physically call. I just sat and called for hours to let them know your Screen Connect's out of date, shut it off until you can figure it out. So I still get involved when it's like that because I want to be part of doing something good in the community, but at least the stress isn't there. Ours was up to date. We got ours right away. All monitored, like, cool, we didn't get hit with this bug because it was a pretty terrible bug that was extremely trivial to exploit. There was a score above 10 on that CV scale. It would have got it.
Yeah.
So I tend to pick. Oh, go ahead.
No, please go ahead, Abe. Please.
Actually, that's one of those things. As I listen to more polished podcasts with multiple people on them, I'm always just like, how do they do it? What psychic power are they using to not do what we just did?
Editing. It's editing.
It's hard. All right, it's editing. Fair enough. Okay. Well, this may or may not stay in then. That was one of the things I was going to ask you about, Tom, because this was one of those action items that I took out of Randy sends all kinds of emails and messages, and I try to like peel out one task to make it look like I read them. And one of them was to do some research, and I saw your Huntress ConnectWise stuff going on. And when I checked out your video, you touched a little bit like you just did about I was calling schools and hospitals. Okay, that's awesome. All right, more. How did some of that go? What were some of the the highlights and the lowlights and the weird story? I love weird human stories. So where did some of the oddities come and go from there?
I'm wondering how much I could talk about with the previous one. So I will talk real quickly. The previous Move It vulnerability was where some of the oddities come in. Is when you end up on the phone with very large, like publicly traded companies, and you're telling them that their Move It stuff is on, and they're like, no, I'm sorry, that's out of scope. Are you calling for a hacking thing? I'm like, no, you need to turn this off. No, we don't have that. That's out of scope. That's managed by another vendor. We're like, no, you need to shut this down. That includes state agencies. So some of those are kind of weird because we did the same thing with Move It. Back to the Screen Connect one. It was a little odd. One of the MSPs I ended up talking to, another competitor of mine, if you will, who didn't really know who he was, but they ended up, their salesperson kind of panicked because first he called me, thought I needed help with tech, because I left a message because that's all he had. And then it flipped the script on him and he realized, oh crap, we're vulnerable. And he seemed to have a good understanding. He goes, oh, he's like Googling while I'm on the phone. Hold on, what are you talking about? There's a lot. He goes, he's reading blog. He goes, wow, this is really bad. I'm going to get on that. And I actually checked and they updated it within an hour of me calling. One disappointing one was a large school district. And granted, they're in a very rural area of Michigan. Some people were very receptive. One person was like, yeah, I know. I ain't updated in a while. And I'm pausing. I'm like, you should really do that. It's been on my to-do list. I was like, you're going to get hacked if you don't do this. Probably. It was like, I said, well, I don't know how more I can help you, but feel free to Google this. You'll find some information on it. If there's something I can do to help, let me know. Thanks. Click. Just hung up. Just like, okay.
The spectrum of technical people is always one of the things that I think is one of the best parts of tech. Like everyone gets in feeling like, well, we're all nerds and like everyone's the same. You're going to be working with this super homogenous group of people. And there is this massive disparity of people and they all, they find their home all over the place. And having been a part of an MSP myself, I know exactly the person you're talking about.
This person, they maybe they're having a bad day. I don't know.
100%.
Maybe they had just dealt with one too many teachers calling them or some students smashing a Chromebook. Who knows? I mean, not easy. We work with school districts and because we do like a co-managed thing. So we'll work with like the heavy lift and we're taking heavy lift off them because when you see what they're dealing with day to day, that you'd pull your hair out. You're like, oh man, I thought end users are bad. Kids? Why is there comment in this thing? Who would do
Yeah.
that to a network port?
Who wouldn't do that to a network?
Yeah. I mean, I'll give them an A for creativity for some of the
Yeah.
fun things that they've done.
Amazing.
Schools are always interesting. One of the funny stories I have is we redid a whole camera system for a district, and they did a really good job of vetting before I came in the door, proper security procedures. Who are you? Why are you here? And so they let me in. It was actually not too hard. I was like, just a tech person. They didn't actually validate my ID, which kind of bothered me, but like, whatever. I got in. The funniest part, once you're on the inside, the relaxation goes full. Like they just have students doing stuff, so they don't care what else you're doing. So I had to get in, couldn't find the IT guy, couldn't get to the tech room where I was supposed to set something up. And I go, I have an idea. All I'm supposed to do is change some parameters on the camera VLAN, but I can't get in the room where it is. I went and grabbed a step stool, and I unplugged a camera and plugged a little RJ45 in it and brought it down. I sat with my laptop with the wire going up to the ceiling, and I just got all my work done. Nobody asked me for 30 minutes why I was sitting in a hallway plugged into the ceiling. Not a walking by. I mean, it's weird. It's a weird security thing because, like, once I got past the gatekeepers who were supposed to keep the oddballs out of the building, you're in the building. You got through security, so here you are. Someone probably told you it was okay to plug into the ceiling. And I thought about that as a really interesting.
100%. 100%.
Yeah,
We had
everything. Never had to find the IT guy, and I was like, I got your thing fixed. You wanted fixed. Have a great day. You're like, how'd you fix it? I'm like, I plugged it into your ceiling. There's like a pause.
we had to capture the flag as one of my senior projects when I was in university, and it was against the actual IT department of the university, and everyone was having this terrible time like trying to come in through the front door, and I happened to have a badge for the data center and just walked in, plugged in, got my flag and walked out, and no one questioned it once. And I think that's one of the things we often forget is just how much we don't care about what other people around us are doing, how much we just try to stick to ourselves and what we're trying to do. And I don't know where I'm going with that, but but I agree with you. And having done some weird stuff like that on my own, it's always interesting to see how people react around you when you're breaking the norms of the place that you're in, right?
Yeah.
And how they work with that. How, so you kind of have these two sides, right? One where you're like working with customers and one where you're engaging with an audience online and things. How do you balance the kind of the go between those things? Speaking of breaking norms, like doing a YouTube video is a little bit different than getting up in front of a group of technical people and communicating a new system design or something along those lines. How do you balance those things out?
I have very poor life balance. So
I don't. Moving on. Yeah.
Yeah, I put in too many hours. I obsess a bit much. It is a weird thing because I spend time talking with, I still do all my own editing work and things like that. So I built this studio. And the level of obsessiveness is when I say I built the studio, if you look at my studio tours from the last couple of years, I included the segments of I grabbed a hammer and nails and did I put the drywall up and everything. The only thing I couldn't do is mud. Turns out mudding drywall and painting, there are limits I have. Those are absolutely beyond me. Like it will look so bad. I'm like, I started it and I said, this is where Tom calls it quits and calls in professional. But no, learning all the editing software and everything else has been, I don't know, there's something I do enjoy about it because it requires me to hyper focus. I had dumped a screenshot on Twitter the other day, and when someone's looking at it, there's like 200 cuts on that video. I'm like, yep. I said, this video took 8 hours to make. It's an hour-long video. There's about 8 hours, maybe 10 hours of time into making a video and trimming it up. But there's something kind of fun. It's this tediousness, and you focus. Everything's got to be turned off. I get to hyper-focus on something, and there's a satisfaction when it's done. The editing tools are just like any other. It's learn that flow, learn the process, then you hyper-focus into that flow state of getting it on there. And it's just kind of a fun thing. One of the reasons I continue to do my editing myself is the alternative is I have friends that are technical that do these deeper technical dives that have editors. The problem is their editors edit off their script and I don't write scripts. So until I figure out how to write script that I can hand an editor so they'll know which is the right cut to use, or when I said something wrong, I just decided to keep editing myself. So it's just kind of a obsessiveness about it. But I also do everything I can on the front end. And I've actually helped numerous people in the tech world build out. Matter of fact, it was funny. Someone said, hey, this guy's ripping off your style or something like that. I'm like, That's Jay. He has keys to my studio. I literally gave him the keys to my building and said, here, use my studio until you figure it out. Here's how my workflow works. So I've actually put together kind of a big group of us all on Discord. We all reference each other, like people you might have heard of, like Jeff Geerling or Wendell from Level 1 Tax. There's a larger group of us now that we all share tips of how to be very technical people in our day jobs,
Yeah.
if you will, and then bring that flow forward to how do you do this in the easiest way possible. So we actually spend a lot of time talking about how to build workflows to do this really well. The other thing that makes it easier, where there's less editing most of the time in my tutorials, is the fact that I do this. I'm not trying to understand how to do it. This is what I do day in and day out. So the flow comes out pretty good. And there's less time, less things to cut. The last video was a whole virtualization tutorial video. There's just so many sections I had recorded. You have to trim it all out, and you have to trim out all the pauses because, like, I'm explaining how to load Windows or how to load this. No one wants to watch the bar go across for 20 minutes. So you have to trim the bar going across for 20 minutes. So that's where the tedium of cut comes in.
No, that's awesome. Do you find that you mentioned hyper focusing, which is a thing that I can relate to 100%. Do you find with videos, are you a person, hey, you sit down, you do the whole thing in 8 to 10 hours straight, get it all done? Or are you like, hey, I'm going to do this section and then I'm going to procrastinate the hell out of the next this next part? Because that's me, to be.
The data center video was one of those. I got it. I organized the data from it, from all the shots I did for the data center tour. And then I sat on it for like 3 months because I looked at it going, man, I recorded 2 hours of video. That's a lot of video. Me wandering around for 2 hours with the camera turned out to be a hard task to edit. So yeah, absolutely. Like there's this part where you just got to organize from random file numbers that are incremental to some context that I add to each one of the files, then go, now what? And so I do occasionally sit on them for a little while until that hyper focus comes in. And my wife does know. And the way, I try to think of myself as a rational person, but my wife knows, and my response is completely irrational. If someone bugs me while I'm doing one of my 8-hour edit sessions, God help them, because I am going to be angry. I am going to be, I don't know why it's the only thing really. So I will lose where I'm at. There is no dinner today. There is this until it's finished, is what I tell my wife. Sometimes, she knows, like, there's a session going on. Yes. That door over there, she told me I need to get a little button that says doing my thing in here, like on air. I'm not too bad about it, but I do try to really, you just gotta do it. Cause it's like anything else. You get like a flow state for doing it. But yeah, once I stop, it could end up a project that doesn't get touched for 2 weeks. That's absolutely possible.
100%. Yeah. And you like start to build it up in your mind as being this much larger task than it suddenly is, and you sit down and what you thought was going to take you 12 days takes you 12 minutes or something along those lines, right?
Yeah. The data center one was a lot of editing on there, partly because I knew everything I wasn't supposed to show that did get on camera, so it had to be trimmed out. And even after that, I had to send it to their media people for review, which also, when I know there's a blocker to where I might have to touch this again because someone else has to approve it, it's really, really hard.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So I'm like, I'm going to put all this work in and someone's going to tell me no. And I'm going to get angry that I have all this work and someone told me no. But the only thing they had me trim out was there was the guy giving the tour gave the wrong number of BTUs. I'm talking like he was off by 200 on something. He says, I'll get roasted on the internet that I was off by like 200 BTUs when I said that. I'm like, how did you know you were off by 200? Like, dude, the dude's like an encyclopedia. I don't know if you see my data center video. The dude's like an encyclopedia that I went on a tour with. The guy was like the stuff we talked about off camera that I couldn't have recorded just blew my mind. The guy was just like, he knew every detail of every single piece of that data center, like wild. It was kind of cool.
Wow. That's awesome. What's your process for ideating, for coming up with these ideas, for determining what you're going to do next?
Very frequently, because it's the easiest way for me to do something, is what I'm working on now. What's the project we have? What's the thing we're working on? So, for example, we had the Supermicro calls them like their AI servers and things like that. Well, we were working on it, so I made a video about it. It's got all those NVIDIA cards. The server's like $130,000, man. This thing's wild, but it's for doing high levels of data processing. We were playing with Hashcat because we were like, we can run all the rainbow tables. What can we do with 4,000 watts of server? Well, the first thing we learned we can do with 4,000 watts of server is blow up the lab. The lab cannot handle that wattage. So the first thing was like rigging extension cords to plug into other sockets because there's 4 power supplies. But that whole process was kind of, that's what I was working on. So that's what that video is about. The Screen
Mm,
Connect video, obviously it was topical and of the moment.
yeah.
And when I was doing Greylog, we were setting Greylog up for ourselves and things like that. So it's like, hey, this is cool. Once I got it set up, it's easiest to do and it's fresh in my head. It also
100%.
served a double purpose. It's documentation. Even right now, we have knowledge base articles in our knowledge base at work that are just references to my videos. Like,
Honestly, that's brilliant.
Yeah, that's awesome.
yeah, it's like we got the content here. We'll just reference Tom has a video on the topic and we'll go through and do that. So we had a bunch of some of the new staff are learning XCP&G. So I wanted to, one, do a deep dive on that topic, especially kind of topical with the VMware. We were a pretty big VMware reseller, but not big enough to become their partner with their new rules and everything else. So we're migrating large things off of VMware over to XCP&G. We've always done a lot of consulting on it, but hence I've got a lot of XCP&G videos I've done. And we didn't have a good official knowledge base for, do you load the Windows Update tools or the Citrix tools? And I said, I'm going to settle the argument. It'll be up Monday, guys. That's what I told them. So this morning I released a video on exactly how to set up the drivers, the tools, and the details. And now that's part of the Windows load documentation. But I always like to make it all public because why not? Everyone might like this video.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome.
But it's fun when you, sorry. See, I did it again. Randy, you're going to be busy on this one. I think what's really interesting with that one is we had talked about the diversity of people coming into this. And when you get the group of always right, beating your nerd chest type of people, you can settle pretty much every argument with, hey, if you can go look in the KB. If you don't believe it, if you Google it, you're finding my video anyway. And we all know top Google result wins. So moving on. And so you get to be the authoritative part, like you're holding like an internet weapon. That's cool.
Google me, I tell people, see who comes up first.
Yeah, exactly. Google it, see what comes up first. I was friends with someone that ran the community for a very large, I'll say adult community, the social community, and in the rated 18 plus category. And it was interesting to see, like, you'd have a conversation with someone and they could just walk up and, hey, so what's your social media handle? And they'd use like the public, Twitter with mind-blowing amounts of followers and would say something to this person, just like, you should turn your phone's notifications on, and then just and like, that's kind of cool. It's like an internet social sledgehammer. That's fun. But moving away from some of that, let's unpack a little bit about what you do. So you got this massive amount of expertise that's led you to where you are, and with your partner in the security side. What are some of the cool things that you're working on there? What are some of the cool solutions you've gotten to with customers? What are some of the highlights from that these days?
We've done a lot of storage lately. That's been, and we just submitted another bid. It's over $600,000 for more storage for this customer. It's kind of the thing where, especially when it comes to the cloud, everyone likes the cloud till the bill comes, and the bill has come. And it's funny, computers keep getting cheaper, but every year cloud companies charge more. And we're seeing kind of this move going, maybe it doesn't all need to be in there. And we've gotten niched in with a lot of these movie industries. One of the companies that we've worked with that we can talk about publicly is like Moonshine Post. You might have not heard the name, but you go, wait a minute, aren't they the people that produce for Netflix? Yes, they are. They definitely are some really cool people. And 45 Drives we've been very public about a relationship with them. Matter of fact, one of the videos where someone says, you should really disclose you're getting sponsored. I'm like, I spent $1 million buying your hardware. I don't have to disclose anything. They didn't. Yes, I purchased it and just review it. So my relationship is on like mostly that direction. But the storage solutions have been really, really interesting. Seeing these companies that someone pitched them on the cloud. And when they looked at it, they said, the recurring cost of this seems a little bit outlandish. So they start looking around for other solutions, pop across my videos and go, hey, what do you think? Could you build this for us? And as we've built these out, some of these now are 2-year-old installations. So we're expanding on them further. We actually are working on one in the automotive space too. We just installed 2 petabytes of storage for them now to collect data analytics for things. And they're expanding again on that because it turns out when you collect data around design of cars, because you can put sensors and everything, it seems to produce an incredible amount of data. So I'm hoping if this other bid goes through, we'll do a whole project about, because they have so much now that it's exceeding the 2 petabytes and they want to store it on tape. I don't know why they want to keep it all, but whatever. Those kind of projects are really interesting me, the storage ones. And then combine that with the virtualization, the fact that the XCP&G stuff, we've done a lot of work with some large companies on that with thousands of VMs because, and this started even before the most recent price hike with VMware. When they did some price hikes just a while ago, we had a company with 2,000 virtual machines. The reason they have a lot of them is because they spin up a virtual machine for each instance of their hosted phone solution. And they go, VMware is making this untenable for us for the size and servers we want to buy because we want to offer affordable phone services, and they're going to skyrocket our price. We don't want to, they keep everything segmented, very detailed for security reasons. They don't want any potential. So everyone's like this individual small Linux VM to host each person's PBX instance, and lots of isolation. But by the time you add all that up with VMware, you're like, yeah, this is going to get expensive. So doing some of these migration process, I work directly with the team at Bates who writes it. So I chat with them from time to time. They're very public about the development over in their forums. So those have been really exciting as well. The fact that it's all open source blows my mind, that like you can play with this really amazing thing in your home lab with no licenses. Just turn it all on, full high availability and all kinds of fancy stuff. And that just makes me smile to think that you can play with this in the home lab and become skilled enough at it to then bring those skills with you to the enterprise pretty ready. So that's why I'm such a big advocate for home lab. That's where people's real learning starts on all of this, is how do I make this accessible? That's one of the reasons why when I do videos on some things, I try to focus on if they have a paid or a community edition. I always go for the community edition to show as many features as possible. Mention, hey, support the project if you're a business. But I know a lot of the people I'm talking to are the home lab people, because that's where you get excited about this. And that's what breeds the next generation of people working in the enterprise tech.
That's awesome.
100%. So my next question was specifically about open source and what appears to be your love for it through your YouTube channel and things. And I think in a lot of ways, you just answered the question of just the accessibility and those things. How do you walk the line between, personally as your business and those things, between the usage of the software and the supporting of the organization, right? Like most of these open source projects cannot exist without some sort of for-profit organization behind them in some way, shape, or form, right? How do you balance that? How do you take that forward? And what's your personal philosophy around that?
I love, and people ask me, I've given a talk to some IT professionals, and that talk was about this exact question of how do you even choose an open source project? Because I can't just choose something being built by some random person that has a GitHub account and then trust my business to it. And what I do is I look for open source with a business model behind it. I think that's an important aspect of it. All right, does this project I want to rely on? And you could use TrueNAS as an example. Going, all right, what's behind this project? Oh, okay, cool. We have IX Systems, who has been funding the TrueNAS by selling hardware. Awesome. We understand the business model. We understand the process. Oh, look, they sell 5-year support contracts with full SLA agreements for hardware replacement. Cool. That's solid business model. Look at Netgate with pfSense. They're the steward of pfSense. Netgate is actually, I think, contributes 15% of the code base of FreeBSD contributes back from the people over at Netgate. So not only are they doing a lot of upstream, as is IX Systems, but they're taking that hardware model again and selling it with pfSense. So I always tell people, like, hey, here's the business model. Here's why they sell the hardware. I know you can always buy something else to put it on, but if you want to support the project, or they do now have their basic like home lab, HomeKit licenses that you can do. I always look for those software with it and encourage people, like however their method is. I frequently will talk to the founders. What's your method? Do you have a donation method? Do you have a subscriber method? Do you have a business support method where you say, hey, let the community have it, but if you're using it for business, kick us some things on there? Awesome. Even the invoicing software I use called Invoice Ninja, Hillen and those guys are really great who put that together, and they have a really simple license model where actually they sell subscriptions, and hosting is where they make their money, but they do have, if you want to self-host it, they ask for $30 a year. I'm like, someone actually tried to do a pull request and then was bugging me to submit it to get rid of the bug, the nag screen, if you will, because it says powered by Ninja if you don't pay. And I'm like, really? You can't pay these people $30 a year for an entire invoicing platform? I said, you're about to get banned from my channel. I said, what are you thinking? I said, these people, it takes time and effort. The code might be free, but people's time is not. So I've always been aware of that. As a matter of fact, the thing I've always found interesting, and this goes back for years, I'm open source nut job, as I was called in the 90s and early 2000s. Now open source a little bit more in the mainstream. But the earlier days of it, I was always looked at open sources. It makes the code less important or the product less important. It makes the people important. The people that support it, it makes you think about them a little bit differently, as opposed to it's just as code base. So I've always, like I said, longtime advocate to it, but I do look for and understand the need. There's always a fun little project someone does as a hobby, But when it comes to the stuff that is serious infrastructure to our business, I like looking for projects that have business models around them. Graylog is an example of that. You have, cool, I can play with Graylog and set up my home lab, or I can go for the whole Graylog secure package and support that I can get you. I think each one of these, and that's what brought me to Graylog and eventually led us to this podcast.
100%. 100%. I think you make an important point there, which is like the code is free. Like it's out there, it's there. And if this is kind of my personal philosophy on this whole thing, being someone that sells open source software, I fully support you utilizing the heck out of our software, right? Get it out there, get it going. But if your use case or your organization needs something that is more robust and fits more into more that enterprise use case, right? More that business style use case, then that's what we're here for, right? And we're here and we're going to keep the open source project free and open and available to you all to tinker with and to play with and to learn. But there are a lot of people out there that need more than that. And that can't be free. If you want the free and open play for version, the serious version can't be free. It's just how it works.
Yeah. And there's always, I watch a lot of things on YouTube, like we started this whole conversation with, and I'll find videos on, I watch videos on how to do the drywall. Turns out I'd rather pay someone. I don't care how good the video is. It tells me how to do it. There comes a point when there are things you just outsource. There's things as a business we outsource because someone would have to maintain it. And it's easier just to buy the supported package. XCPNG, cool. I can do the self-build. I do my videos with the compile it yourself version. But when we sell this to customers or what we use internally, we got a business paid license, one that's got the updates and everything else. And we're happy to pay those fees because no one really wants to babysit it. No one really wants to have the task of doing it. It's something fun for your home lab. I love the learning experience. It's sometimes why I even tell people, run something like Security Onion. And you're like, wow, this is amazing. And then you become very tedious. And first you think your whole network's under attack, and maybe it is, maybe it's not. Then you realize all the false positives, you spent a lot of time on it. And then you go, wait a minute. Oh, if I want to deploy this to a customer, I probably need to pay someone to monitor all this. And I understand the value of a SOC team. And there's a reason, as much as I may like a tool like Security Onion, there's like, the reality of it is you probably want a fully managed SIM. And this is why you may want to outsource it. Unless someone's going to pay you, and they're not likely to, an individual at one company, just to babysit this software where you never have a day off and you just babysit it all day. There's things you have to balance and outsource. So I think there's the same rationale applies to open source. There's stuff that's, you can just say, I'm going to compartmentalize it, or other stuff that you're going to, oh, nope, that's perfectly fine. I'm thrilled that you guys have a whole paid package that you'll do the setup for me and I can just pay you. Awesome.
100%.
That's awesome. And that's it. That always raises interesting questions, especially from the open source. And as obviously Graylog's heavily involved in that side of the community and turning that into business so that Joe can go to Disneyland playing on a chair in the living room. But for billions, actually, when Broadcom buys. Anyways,
Yeah, please no.
But that's probably a good point to pivot there. And so we have another part of our show where we always ask our guests your thoughts and your advice to the broader community. And I think this time I want to stick it to vendors. Keep it to vendors. Not stick it. I want to stick it to vendors. I want to keep it.
Occasionally, yes.
I see. I see where that script problem comes from. Yeah. Let's keep it to vendors. So in your time, your experience, your journey, what is your advice to vendors in the security space right now?
Is the one thing I love and why I'm friends with the people. I don't know if this is going on as a video, but there's a record album. Well, it looks like a record album behind me. That's actually a Huntress when they hit 2 million endpoints a while ago. I think they're at like 4 million now. They gave that out to the people. But one of the things I like about them in the security space, when there's an event that affects, they primarily do focus on the MSP industry, but Move It was a little outside of there. And they had a good write-up on that, is dropping this knowledge out there in a very cooperative, collaborative way, and understanding that security is a team sport. We all are better together. It's really annoying, and some vendors failed miserably, even with the recent Screen Connect one, by turning it into like a sales opportunity as opposed to a knowledge sharing. One of the vendors reached out to me because I did the video on Screen Connect. I will leave them unnamed. Obviously, they were streaming up on Twitter. But they reached out to me wanting to jump on the channel, and they like to let me know. I see you shared Huntress. We had the first post on it, and I replied right away, your post wasn't useful. Your post was where we notify people first, but you gave no actual intelligence, no links to everything, just how your software could detect these problems, which actually isn't true. And they just quit replying to me right away. They kind of got the gist of it. Like, part of me wanted to come live on my channel. Let me tear you down publicly, because that but I don't like being petty. Um, the better way to be is share these things, share this information back and forth. I've seen people posting like Yara rules and how to detect it right away. And are people going, oh, well, here's how you can tune the threat detection a little bit better. That's what makes it better. Don't try to hide all that. This is a real-time problem that's going on. How do we make the security better? Eventually people will buy the tools and things like that, but do the engagement with the community, work with that, become friends with all the right people in cybersecurity to get that and keep that reputation going. I think that's huge for security. It's just really looking at it as a team sport. How do we make the entire uh, ecosystem better and bring more people into the fold with sharing knowledge publicly? Because years ago, it was always the first person to know something, try to keep it a secret. Our secret sauce is better because we have the secret knowledge that we won't share with any other vendor. So buy our product. Now it's more like, hey, how can we get all these pieces of information out there better?
Yeah, that's a really good answer. I like your answer. That's I wanted to like, yeah, I wanted to kind of pick some of it apart, but I'm like, no, no. That's
It's, it's my favorite places are still hacking conferences and things like that. It's always been a better community. Hackers are always like, this is the ethos of how the hackers and open source. I feel like they're kind of a Venn diagram of very similar. Maybe some people poke and take things more apart versus the open source people are willing to give away, how everything works, but also are usually taking something apart and putting it together in an interesting way. But that ecosystem always kind of leads that way. But I think what we're seeing now is as I said, I started my company because I had problems with authority. There are issues you always had with the people above you telling you things like, well, open source is a toy. No one has time for your little silly toys, Tom, and things like that. I remember someone saying to me getting irrationally angry because I'm like, my solution will work. And eventually I found people who would let me deploy it until I could do it myself. But that being said, people like me are now in charge of things now. And suddenly those people who told us we couldn't use open source in the business are retired now. And now we're in charge and we understand the value of it. And we brought that community feeling with us to these higher level positions. And we're like, no, we should share knowledge. We shouldn't just try to lock it all away. And you can still have a good career and try to give everything away. Maybe that's one of the things I put on myself because someone said, I'm going to sell classes. I'm like, no, one of my goals is to keep giving it away and try to figure out some other way to monetize stuff. Like my goal is to keep putting. So I think we need more knowledge out there. You had a good conversation on your last episode with how do we update education? How do we make it look different? Because you're right. It's looked the same for so long. And YouTube was just like, I looked up how to fix drywall and failed. At least the information's out there. If I would have actually determined I could do it, it would have been good. So I think this is all comes back full circle to just putting all that knowledge out there.
yes, and once again, I had things to add to that, but I also know I'm getting the angry messages from Randy. It's like, hey, we're running long, and
I do rant a little bit, so sorry.
we all
And
do.
by-
It's what makes an audio show. It's the
And by angry messages, it just means the counter is turning red, and that's not me. Like,
I interpret that as Randy is angry now. It's, the one I did want to touch on before we pick up the next bit was we had an interesting tidbit there about kind of the value. Like you said, you even commented on the Twitter post. Yeah, you were first, but it had no value. And we've talked before about where do you find the divide? And once upon a time, yes, I worked red team, was in the hacker space, and all ones and zeros should be free, etc. But I also like making mortgage payments now and taking kids to Disney World. The interesting debate comes down to, oh yeah, just put the enterprise features behind the enterprise product, etc., whatever they are. I am now, as someone who came up from the technical side and not on the vendor side, it's fascinating to me where that line is to people. And yes, the home lab part is perfect. It's great. And the moment, obviously, it's funny. In Greylog, we've got a history of this. Go check our forums and stuff like that. We'll put one feature and say, okay, this is a business feature. Let's put that over here. And then the universe explodes and everyone
Yes.
screams and yells at you. Or they don't even notice, right? And then businesses come in and say, we really need that. Let's talk. Let's have a conversation. And that value prop and value divide, I had never imagined the complication and the nuance behind that until I got here. And so I'm not one to be like, hey, it all should be free. Just pay to host it or pay for support or whatever. And that was my attitude. I'm not going to lie. And now I can't believe how interesting that conversation is, how complicated that conversation is. And my hat's off to the people at Greylog and all the other vendors that do that do have that conversation and put those things in place. And again, to people like you that are like, you know what, I'll find other ways to monetize. And
Yeah.
so when that's an option.
Yeah, it's really tough. I've been in those conversations. There's also one of the reasons because those put me in what I call my thought spirals that I don't know the answer to, and I just get really aggravated. And this is why Tom doesn't run a business technically anymore. Do you think? Because there's still some hard decision have to be made of what do we give away, even as CNWR or as a consulting firm. When is it scoping and paid scoping versus when is it a sales call? When you're talking about storage servers and someone, what's the best solution? Do I say true NAS or do I go through the architecture, what we're going to do for you, and then you take it yourself and do it without hiring me to do it? I don't know. I've now let someone else, I've now unburdened myself with some of that. I'm still part of the process of where the lines get divided, but you're right. There's not like this on-off answer. We can say everything wants to be free, but all this fancy studio gear still has to get paid for, the cameras and all this stuff.
That's right.
This is all at a nice place, and I love new gadgets, and I want to be able to buy them and pay my bills.
That's exactly it. And so that's a whole new show. Randy, find us someone that we can all yell at each other about how to. Perfect. That's awesome. Well, thank you very much for that, Tom. That was great. I wanted to dive into that. But the next part's Randy. So Randy, take it away, my friend.
All righty. Well, I'm excited about this next segment because we've got a rare opportunity to conduct an experiment here and see if the subscription reducing effects of this next segment can cross channels and cross platforms. Tom, are you ready for our lightning round?
I am ready.
All righty. I've got 90 seconds on the timer here. And here we go. Star Wars, Star Trek, or Doctor Who?
Star Trek.
If you could have if you could have any superpower, what would it be?
Invisibility.
If you weren't in your current career, what other job or profession would you choose?
Farming?
I knew it wasn't going to be drywall finishing.
No, not carpentry, not carpenters.
If you could work anywhere in the world for a year, where would it be?
Oh, that one's hard. I love Michigan. That's where I'm at. I'm
That's
happy
fine.
here.
That's awesome. What's the most adventurous thing you've ever done?
We'll keep this safe for work. Get married again? Probably some of my motorcycle trips. I've definitely done stupid things on those off-roading adventure riding. So
Nice. If you could only listen to one artist or album for the rest of your life, who would it be?
I have no idea. I barely listen to music. So that one's really, I could not answer.
Well, even harder, would you rather fight a horse-sized duck or 100 duck-sized horses?
Oh, I'll go with the 100. Aim for it.
All right, that's our lightning round. Thanks, Tom.
Yeah, the Star Trek one always. I sometimes get controversial and bring that up because that is a dividing line of the tech.
Oh
world.
yeah,
100%.
yeah. It's like I'd get in less trouble if I asked about religion.
Mhm.
Yeah,
That's true.
probably with this audience. And
You know
can I
what?
just say, like, we have a timer that runs in the background of this shop, and yet every time Randy still uses his iPhone.
Well,
and
because
still
our
makes
timer
it.
doesn't ring.
And it's not even like it's like a third tool. It's like Randy sets up and delivers the timer to us and
Yeah.
still uses his iPhone.
Yeah.
It's Randy's timer.
Yeah, it's Randy's timer. Awesome. Well, this has been a great episode. Thank you very much for joining us. So thanks everyone, listeners. It's Tom Lawrence of Lawrence Systems and many other places and adventures in the Michigan area, sometimes on a motorcycle. But yes, thank you very much. You can find us on Beyond the Bite with Joe and Abe at all of the socials, as we've covered last time and more recently. Somewhere written down somewhere, it'll tell you where to find us on socials. How's that?
It might.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.
Right. We should really do better at that. Note for next time.